There we go. Okay.
Okay, so welcome everyone to the first Friday event of March. Our speaker today, presenter, is Tiffany-Ashton Gatsby, and they are a queer and disabled PhD student in the University of Washington Sociocultural Anthropology program, also pursuing I'm letting in somebody else, a graduate certificate in disability studies. They co-chair the QueerCrip Research Collective and Pathways for All Huskies, an accessible wayfinding initiative, and serve in a student seat on the Society for the Anthropology of Consciousness board. They are a proud community college graduate and transferred to UW, where they earned their BA, graduating summa cum laude in 2022, and were the recipient of the President's Medal. Tiffany-Ashton is a two-time recipient of the Point Foundation Opportunity Grant, a three-time Pride Foundation Scholar, a GSBA Scholar, Mortarboard Scholar, University of Washington Husky 100 and Homecoming Scholar, Harlan Hand Grant recipient, and Phi Beta Kappa. They recently received certification in ethics in psychedelic care from the Synthesis Institute and are training as a psychiatric doula as part of their pilot dissertation fieldwork examining queer and disabled equity and inclusion in psychedelic care. Join me in welcoming Tiffany-Ashton Gatsby.
Hello. Um, so I will go ahead and share my screen and I'll tell y'all a little bit more about myself. It's not a list. So yeah, we'll be talking about inequity in altered states and the role of power in psychedelic access. So um I mean my road to, I guess, kind of studying or wanting to study uh psychedelics and psychedelic care is um it kind of, I guess, happened organically. I left home back in the 90s and, had a bit of a traumatic upbringing. My mom um, had psychiatric issues that were never treated. She, didn't want to, be a medicated subject or, deal with any of that. She had a traumatic brain injury, and and so I took off and lived on the street in San Francisco and was kind of part of that counterculture society for a little while, and picked mushrooms on a piece of land in Eureka, California that was doing research to see if they could help treat or cure HIV/AIDS back then. Took LSD with someone who claimed to be Timothy Leary's grandkid. Who knows if that was true? So that was kind of my like early introduction to that. I did come back home, went to medical assisting school because I had always wanted to be an MD. Got married, had a kid, life happened, then got diagnosed with MS and started this journey of basically being what I call a professional patient. Um, Ended up having to leave the workforce, went on disability, and found like a real sense of healing through art. Um, Entered the cannabis industry for a little while and stumbled into this world of psychedelic care and ketamine therapy through a social media post, which looked probably something like this. On the screen is an image from Instagram. It's a post from Field Trip Health. It is a beautiful setting of a calm room with some candles, pillows on the ground, uh, some nice rugs and like a gong. And I had always found those sort of healing environments inviting. It was nothing ever that I could afford, but therapists had always talked about, oh, if you could afford to go off to one of those healing centers, there's a great one in Arizona. It's only $40,000 to go there for a month. It's great for PTSD treatment if you could ever do something like that, but I don't think insurance covers it. And you're scrolling on Instagram and see something like this pops up and oh, that looked great. um and, the post says, at Field Trip Health, we put deep care and attention into the design of our health centers to evoke coziness and comfortability during your journey. Check out the inspiration behind our spaces below by our head of design, the moss walls when originally designing these spaces and thinking about psychedelic experiences. And I said, wait, psychedelic experiences? What's this? And I first saw an ad like this right after I graduated from my bachelor's as I was getting ready to go into my PhD program, which I was planning on studying healing through art for queer and disabled folks, more geared towards like community healing. And that kind of set me on this summer of intense research, which I didn't really know that that's what I was doing, but I probably spent a few hundred hours researching psychedelic care, psychedelic therapy. Joyous was another company that I found through another Instagram ad because you know how the algorithms work. Once you start clicking on one thing, they just keep coming. So Joyous is low dose ketamine. The image on the screen here, it says very low dose ketamine treatment. What is low dose ketamine? And it shows a purple container with some like waxy, square waxy ketamine lozenges. And in the background, there are books and a plant on a table. It says joyous team. There are many benefits of very low dose psycholytic ketamine for those living with anxiety and depression, including improved productivity, lessened anxiety, elevated mood, and enhanced clarity. I started talking about this with my therapist. I was doing, research looking into, lots of journal articles, lots of like NIH articles, um, just trying to find out as much information as I could. And I decided, okay, I'll call up Joyous and give it a shot. It was $129 a month. Seemed pretty inexpensive. It didn't come with any retreat, which I was very sad about. It didn't come with any bells and whistles, but it was designed to take every day in kind of like a low dose, non hallucinogenic form. It was they basically said, it's equivalent to like having a glass of wine, just make you feel a little relaxed. I do have some videos here. Let's see, let's stop the share and go to my other screen. Okay, so this is another.
Each medicine I find has
Can you hear that?
on what you're looking to work on, trauma or depression or anxiety. Currently, ketamine is the only legal psychedelic medicine that can be prescribed. The other thing I'd like to consider is who is your team. So when you're choosing a psychedelic medicine experience, are you supported by clinicians, guides? Who are the people that are holding you in the space that you're choosing? The safer that you feel in your experience, the more you'll actually be able to relax and therefore receive. So once you choose that you'd like to have an adventure with.
So that's another Instagram post. This is from Mind Bloom. This was something else that I saw. The person there speaking is talking about, being supported in an experience. I looked at Mind Bloom. This is another at-home ketamine experience. It was a little bit more expensive than doing something like joyous that I was doing. But if you notice here on the screen, Mind Bloom is a fully at-home model. You do have a clinical consultation, um, but it is not really like a guided. It's a telehealth model. So it says with the person on Instagram, you were fully supported through this journey. Um, and maybe you feel fully supported through a journey in a telehealth situation. Maybe you don't. But from that first picture that I saw of this beautiful treatment room, I'm like, laying on my couch doesn't exactly feel as cozy as one of those cool rooms with anti-gravity chairs and all the thing that had really kind of enticed me in the first place. Um, then
Add, it gives you the tools, it gives you what you need to kind of get to be a better person. But when you're trapped in a vicious cycle, honestly, of depression, anxiety, you can't do that stuff. You can't see that light. You can't really make those tools work. Ketamine is like 10 years of therapy in 60 minutes. It basically takes, there is the old Stephen, and that's the old me who was just getting by, who was miserable, for lack of a better word, and just sucking it up every day.
So that's another post from Mind Bloom. And as you heard the gentleman say, 10 years of therapy in 60 minutes for ketamine. And those are the types of ads that are out there flooding social media, which when you see that type of information, to me, it's no surprise that people are interested in pursuing psychedelic therapy. Um, I'm as I said, I kind of put myself in that professional patient background, and looking at moving into a PhD program. I I research everything. I have multiple sclerosis as well as other disabilities, and I don't touch a medication without doing excessive amounts of research, and I don't necessarily trust something that even my doctor or multiple doctors say is safe and effective for me to take without doing my own background research. But plenty of people usually will just jump into some of these situations, medications, treatments, without doing basic research, let alone the type of research that other people do to look into their own wellness. And again, not that there's anything wrong with psychedelic care. I am, several years later, a huge supporter of it and think it is fantastic if done correctly, using proper procedures, ethical guidelines, and respect for the history of either the plant medicine or the substance. But the commercialization and the information that are leading people to these substances, I think, is some of the problems that I think we have to be wary of in the field right now. I will go back to come on. Okay. So, psychedelics, except for ketamine, and depending on how it's used, are illegal federally in most places. They are decriminalized. There's some scheduling issues with the FDA. Um, and people's perceptions are changing. Of course, there was the war on drugs that has heavily influenced that and the propaganda that kind of came out of that. I know I certainly remember the I don't know if I don't know how many people may or may not remember this, but if you took more than a certain number of hits of acid, you were considered criminally or legally insane. That was a big one. Or if you sold acid, you could be it was like a life sentence for every hit of acid you might have sold. There was, just all of these like these rumors swirling, and you can find a lot of this stuff on Reddit actually. Um, but I know like FDA is now fast tracking a drug application for rescheduling of MDMA to use in psychedelic assisted therapy for PTSD through Lycos. This is just as of like February 13th. February 5th, there was a study that came out of what was considered a nationally representative sample showing bipartisan support of psilocybin for psychiatric treatment or well-being enhancement. I've got references for that if anyone is interested. Um, but Foucault, um, the power dynamics around psychedelic care, I think, is what's really kind of driving everything right now, as far as information and access. If you're coming from, an average person position and you don't know anything about it, and you're trying to like go back to square one where you don't know anything, um, and you pop on social media or you just happen upon someone that says they know everything, um what's the landscape of psychedelic care? Who has the power in these relationships? Who are you trusting? um what's legal? Who are you getting the information from? Are you knowledgeable about what areas are decriminalized? um you know can you just purchase a bag of gummies on Instagram because they are being sold on Instagram? There are stores in Canada that you can walk in and grab, you know you can grab mushrooms. You can buy DMT on Reddit. Is that safe? Is that legal? Technically, no. Um, but um, the mainstream media is also sensationalizing things as they do. Um, and I don't know how many people saw the article about the pilot who tried to shut off the engine of the plane, the Alaska airplane. The image here says pilot who tries to shut off engine says he was hallucinating on mushrooms. Joseph Emerson, facing 83 counts of attempted murder, says he hoped he would wake up if Air Alaska plane headed towards crash. The image shows two men, one in a suit, one in a blue, I'm assuming it's a scrubs prison type suit, because I think he's being arraigned in the shot. Um, if you know a little bit more about the story, he wasn't actually currently hallucinating on mushrooms. So again, it's a sensationalized article. He was in the middle of either a break or nervous breakdown. Um, Part of the problem is that pilots are monitored for SSRI use and depression, and they're not allowed to, if they have depression or any sort of mental health symptoms, reporting this can cause problems with employment. So if he took this in his off time, um, and then several days later had this problem where apparently he was sleep deprived, and sure, maybe psilocybin use did trigger this. All of a sudden, it's conflating the issue of mental health versus psilocybin. Did it trigger something? It may well have. Um, but this is all kind of coming to light as Oregon is legalizing facilitated use. And a lot of people also are confusing facilitated use with psychedelic therapy. They're very different. Um, Facilitated use, you need a Oregon license to supervise someone using mushrooms in a space. It is not re- required to be a therapist or a mental health provider. You can go through a training to provide the services. Um, Same with Matthew Perry and the ketamine. The image here shows a picture of Matthew Perry, and it says Matthew Perry's cause of death raises concerns about the effects of ketamine. Um, what's missing from the headline and what was missing from a lot of these stories is that Matthew Perry also had buprenorphine in his system, which is used to treat opioid dependence. It's similar to Suboxone. Um, Obviously, there was misuse of ketamine um, involved in this. So, on one hand, uh, was that potentially a problem, a ketamine overdose? Sure, but was it purely the fault of ketamine? Obviously not. This was a drug interaction case, I'm sure. Um, so it's media sensationalizing information. Um, so um, legal frameworks and access. So the legal status of psychedelics, of course, there's medical use versus recreational use. If somebody's seeking psychedelic therapy versus just wanting to use psychedelics, those are two different distinct purposes for people seeking out psychedelics. There's also access if you're looking for psychedelic therapy or a healing journey. Are you looking at an underground clinic, or are you looking to go to a country where it's legal, or to now Oregon, where facilitated use is legal? Or are you looking for a ketamine clinic where that is legal and potentially covered by insurance? Because some medical insurance does cover ketamine therapy. I had it covered by my health insurance for a while. It was great. Highly recommend, at least for me, not for everybody. There's risks if you're going to the underground market. If you're looking for practitioners, are they trained? You can say that you are trained, but are you actually trained? There are certain training institutes, like there's Synthesis Institute, Sound Mind. Berkeley has a training institute now, training psychedelic practitioners. Those are considered within the industry now like reputable training institutes, but there are also plenty of people that are just saying, yeah, I'm a trained psychedelic practitioner. There are some people out there like claiming that they've been trained by shamans, and while it is this like unregulated space, it's kind of hard to know because it's not legal. You can hear from a friend of a friend that a person worked out really well and they had this great healing journey, and it might very well be a great safe space. Um, and it might not be. It could be somebody that's in it for a quick buck, because there are very different reasons that some people are getting into this profession right now. It is there's some people that are really there for because they feel called to this, practice, and there are other people that that are not necessarily in it for the right reasons. There's also risks associated with unregulated substances. I mean, if you're, looking to Reddit to find access to purchasing, MDMA. Is it actually MDMA? Are you using fentanyl test strips to you know, check to make sure that what you're getting isn't laced with fentanyl? There's also additional risk of harm for BIPOC individuals. Like me, I live a regular apartment, but I do have like a housing voucher. So technically, if I have, I probably have a pot gummy here. Technically, me even having a pot gummy in my apartment, I could probably I can lose my housing voucher for that, even though it's legal in Washington State. So there are concerns for marginalized individuals. Student loan aid, you can if you're criminal or if you're charged for anything, you can lose your student loan aid. Then, of course, there's indigenous medicine practices and psychedelic tourism, which a lot of people don't know about. There's all these ads for psychedelic retreats, and you may have absolutely no idea that there are resources in place that are being depleted. There's right now, like the Bufo toad, there's a call to stop practices for like 5 to 10 years to allow the population to regenerate, because Western tourists are going to, toad lick for the psychedelic properties. But there's a way to, use DMT that's not, depleting the natural resource. There's a potential lack of respect and recognition for Indigenous perspectives in plant medicine. Some of like Oregon's laws, they really tried to incorporate some of this. Colorado seems to be doing a little bit better of a job in their plan to move towards legality. Like there's a bypass if you are an Indigenous practitioner, where you don't necessarily have to go through the same facilitation licensing process. But again, if you don't have the information, unfortunately, you're not going to know. It's a funny Instagram video. I'll save it till the end, but it's pretty hilarious. Again, the cost, it's really expensive. The lack of insurance coverage for psychedelic treatment and psychedelic care. Obviously, if it's not really legal, except for ketamine, it's not going to be covered by insurance, because why would insurance cover it at this point, especially when they don't even necessarily want to cover like brand name drugs or anything like that. And then there's also an issue with equity and ethics and training. Not everyone is training psychedelic facilitators the same way. They're not taking into consideration the full scale of populations that are seeking out psychedelic care and psychedelic therapy. I know people with disabilities are kind of left out of the equation. That's a big issue right now for me personally. And social media also is one of the only places that people can go to get information, especially if you're in rural communities when you don't have access to certain information. You can community build on social media. You you can engage in certain discussions. Like there are great forums on Reddit. There's growers, psilocybin growers. You can identify different strains of mushrooms. You can talk about psychedelic care and practices. However, there's, anytime you jump into a room, a lot of times people will start messaging you in these DMs with, hey, you wanna jump on Signal and buy some, I've got this great stuff. Do you want to buy from me? And the first thing, it's like, well, are you a cop? Or why are you, I wasn't here for that. So it's kind of hard to filter out the noise. And also, do you know if what these people are talking about in these rooms even know what they're talking about? So this is a great post that I found on Reddit that I kind of thought was hilarious. This is in Reddit's our psilocybin therapy group. And the post says, struggling with psilocybin as therapy, please help. I was taking a small to medium-sized dose every couple of weeks for about a year, had some good experiences, then a bad one, then a really good one. Ever since that really good one, I've not really enjoyed the experience. I always get terrible anxiety or worse. Each time I've told myself I don't need to be doing this, but when sober, there's always that voice that tells me to go deeper, to try harder, unlock myself, except I always chicken out. Then I feel like I've let myself down. I feel like I should be brave and do everything I can to better myself. I mediate all the time and work on myself daily. Am I lazy not using psilocybin because it's so hard for me and I don't really enjoy it? Um, there were so many responses to this with like, hey, if you're looking for it for therapy, like, have you thought about talking to somebody that actually like does this professionally? Like maybe you know, you don't like, you're not supposed to like just do it alone and like take it a bunch of times. And maybe you only really need to do it like once and then talk to people to integrate. Did you know that? And the conversation kind of like went back and forth. And this was just a few months ago. I just found this the other day. Um, with, oh, I thought people were doing like psilocybin therapy. So I thought I'm just supposed to take it for therapy. So that's how like this misinformation just kind of gets out there with, oh, people are doing psychedelic therapy. So I just take it for therapy, right? No, because when substances aren't legal and you can't have free access to information, so people are going to these forums, sometimes you can get good information and sometimes stuff like this happens. So, um, thanks Reddit. So it looked like the person got some good information, but also then there was a bunch of people just trying to sell services of come to me, I'm a facilitator, I only charge XYZ. So, um, of course, then, these ads pop up on Instagram all over the place. The image on the screen here is there's a blue background with floating hot pink gummies on some rocks. It says psilocybin gummies, 10 count, galactic. Um, it's Studio LACQ, step into the realm of psychedelic delight with Galactic. We're thrilled to unveil our latest project, crafting a mesmerizing brand and packaging design for a company, Galactic Gummies. Um, I've known people that have purchased these online and have had them shipped and have taken, not necessarily this brand, but have bought stuff from Instagram. I mean, that's up to you whether or not you think that is a safe thing to do. Um, it's not really legal, but they're selling them. Um, and then here's another post from on Reddit, our psilocybin mushrooms. Um, Asking for a friend about mailing dried mushrooms. I have a friend, of course, they're asking for a friend. I have a friend who was thinking about mailing a portion of his dried crop across the states to another friend. And I was wondering if anybody has any words of advice or experience, yay or nay. I don't want either of them to get into trouble. Probably low risk, but very high consequence. Since it's a federal crime, I would absolutely not do it. And another reply was, someone who worked at the post office for several years, you're fine. Just like mentioned in a previous comment, pack them so they don't get crushed. Other than that, you're fine. Weed, on the other hand, you got to properly vac seal and all that jazz so they don't get popped. Have to mention shipping drugs is bad. So be good. And if you can't be good, don't get caught. So, I mean, I mean, on one hand, this stuff is really funny, and on the other hand, it's not funny because people shouldn't have to, you know, get these kind of questions answered in this way where you really don't know what the answer is other than it's illegal. So people are, policing each other, people are getting comments taken down when you're just trying to find good information. I mean, the decriminalization laws by municipality are changing very frequently. I just had a conversation with my therapist the other day about Seattle's decriminalization, and she was convinced that it was no longer decriminalized in Seattle because the changing of state regulations. That's how fast things are moving. So something that could be decriminalized one day could then all of a sudden no longer be decriminalized the next day because they might be um, changing the rules because of of the new laws that they're trying to pass to get things decriminalized because of the medicalization of psychedelic therapy, because they're trying to regulate it further to institutionalize it for the medicalization that they're trying to pass, to legalize it, to schedule it, to make it regulated for the FDA, to make sure that it's patented. You know, there's so many layers to the process that the information gap is huge for people that aren't really on top of it. And then, of course, this means that there isn't really equitable distribution of knowledge, and especially Indigenous knowledge. And you know, if you go back to day one in the whole process, um, you know, there was a huge transgression of trust when um, Indigenous people trusted outsiders with their sacred wisdom, and then that got let out of their community and into the wider world, and things got exploited. So reciprocity is really important. And some people feel that using other substances um, that don't have an original Indigenous origin is important, you know, like using things like MDMA or LSD. There's some providers that feel that that's important. Some people um, are making sure that they're trying to provide free treatment um, for like low income communities. Um, and they're engaging in Indigenous reciprocity, respecting wisdom, making sure that they're talking to local Indigenous communities. Just kind of depends on who you're talking to. But again, because things are so disjointed, it depends on who you talk to, and I think what's going on. But for people that are looking for more information, here are some of the resources that I have found are a little bit more helpful. I think the microdose has a pretty good newsletter. Chacruna Institute, I think, is a great source. Tricycle Day, I think, is another good source. Zendo Project. I mean, these are all, I think all of these have really valuable information. Some of these do send out newsletters that are a little harder to get through, where others are a little bit more succinct if you just are looking for keeping up on information. But there's so much information right now because things are changing so rapidly. I think it just depends on if people are looking at psychedelics as research, or if you're looking at it from curiosity, or if you're looking at getting into psychedelic care. Um, I'm at the point where my brain's like practically on explosion mode. I've spent like almost every single day this week in some sort of ethical training class, overload. And sometimes and again, that's, you know, well, on one hand, it's good to get the information, but on the other hand, you're getting so much information, so bombarded with information, like how much is to the point where your brain's spinning because you're getting so much, and sometimes it's conflicting information as well. But Psychedelic Alpha, that's, if anybody hasn't seen that one, they put out like every single news article and research study that comes out. That's a good one. Just to wrap up, so access of psychedelic knowledge is not equal. Chances are there's some misinformation that has come out in mainstream media or social media. Physicians don't have complete information about psychedelics, but perception and opinion is shifting. If you're in a marginalized group, you're at a higher risk of criminalization for seeking out psychedelic care. Laws, drugs, and scheduling are changing constantly, and there are some resources available if you're willing to do some research and read a lot and you're being watched. Just kidding. Could just be paranoid. And I have tons of information if you're looking for more resources, but chances are a lot of you here already know a lot of it already. At least I know a few of you that do. Thanks for listening to me ramble.
Well, okay, thank you so much. That was, I wish we could all give you a round of applause.
Oh, I do have a really funny video though.
Okay.
Let me pull this one up.
I've been working with Steve the Shaman for about 8 lunar cycles now. He runs healing ceremonies out of his office space at the WeWork in Santa Monica.
May the spirit of the 4ACO trap chocolate uplift and protect you.
Steve takes a unique approach to healing.
You ready for a 4 Loco booster yet?
He incorporates various millennia-old indigenous wisdom traditions into a whitewashed, greenwashed 21st century approach for $3,000 an hour.
Put these Bluetooth headphones in for the peak of the trip.
He's got a tramp stamp that says shaman, so you know he's legit.
Gonna cleanse all of that Sonic and Chick-fil-A fast food from your aura.
The Yelp reviews for Steve the Shaman are insane.
Take 2 of these Micro Boost brain capsules and call me in the morning.
I mean, if Steve were to uproot himself and go down to Mexico or Costa Rica and open a completely unlicensed healing center there by exploiting lax regulatory scheduling in those countries, and then start running Facebook ads targeting vulnerable populations from the global north, I could see Steve the Shaman doing 8 figures in shamanic revenue this year. Easy.
Can I get an advance on next week's ceremony? I'm behind on alimony again.
I mean, what can you say? Where would the world be without Steve the Shaman?
I've been working with Steve the Shaman for about 8
I love that video so much.
Yeah, that's good. A lot of good topics here. Any questions? Any comments? I have a ton, so I'll fill in, but I'm going to leave an awkward silence and give you all a chance to gather your thoughts.
I can't say I really can't stand the Zoom PowerPoint thing. I'm like, it is the worst.
It's okay, it worked. Well, I guess I'll get started with my comments and questions. I've got a couple of issues of access, and I think the issues that you're bringing out in terms of access are really important. So I've got 2 really different topics to bring up. One is about the ketamine therapy, ketamine-assisted therapy. And I feel like ketamine is one of those molecules that's both socially and chemically that are really super interesting. Socially, there's so much I feel like I don't understand about it yet, because around here in Alabama, probably there are everywhere. There's these ketamine clinics where you could go and get hooked up to an IV.
Yeah.
And with absolutely zero assistance or offers of assistance whatsoever. There's not even music. Nobody's in the room with you. They might keep an eye on your blood pressure, but that is literally it.
Yeah.
And it strikes me as sort of not professionally unethical, but it strikes me as sort of morally unethical. It kind of gets my hackles up, but that also you wouldn't want to force people to have therapy either. I mean, there should be some choice involved, but I don't know. What do you have to say about that? What's your familiarity with that whole scene?
So I am actually really familiar with that. I've done that here in Seattle. I feel that one of the reasons they do that and it's more available is because it's easier to get insurance to cover that. Insurance does cover that in some situations. They're able to cover that for chronic pain sometimes, for migraines. Also the cost to run a clinic like that and the cost to perform the service, usually you can get by for about $450, $400, and that's enough to pay the staff and cover at least in Seattle, that's about a break even to run the clinic and pay the staff and do the service. So, um, and for the monitoring and everything like that. Um, the services, they usually require people to have their own therapist. They suggest that you set an intention and, do integration on your own. But for somebody that's looking for some like down and dirty version of, wanting to try you know, the the psychedelic therapy, I mean, sometimes it's a good entry point, especially if you do have concerns with, you know, health issues, you're worried about like medical safety. Like for me, being on so many medications, although obviously like plant medicine is potentially, more holistic and more natural, that sort of thing. If you have like medical trauma, and there's a doctor or a nurse in the clinic, and you might feel safer being protected, knowing that they can, especially with an IV drip versus sublingual ketamine or any of those systems that aren't going to clear your body quickly, they can stop that drip and you're pulled out immediately. So if you have a problem, they can also give you a benzo to stop it really quickly. So if you are like, this is not for me, they can give you stuff to bring your blood pressure down. They can mitigate the situation pretty quickly. So sometimes sometimes it's a good entryway. Now, on the mental health aspect of it, like without support, is it good? I think it depends on the person. I've had great results for it. I'm like, all for it. But also, would I rather do that with a person in the room that is actually there kind of supporting and guiding me through it? Absolutely. I think that would be much better, which is one of the reasons I'm actually like going through the psychedelic like doula training. Actually, the one of the nurses at the clinic that I've gone to is now in the process of the psychedelic doula training as well. And because she feels like a moral responsibility to not just be in the room monitoring the health, situation, feels that she should be acting in a supportive role, but that's not what they are able to provide there at the clinic, mostly because of cost. Um, they just don't have the funds to be able to do it. And, insurance isn't covering it. But right now, Kaiser covers it. Kaiser's covering this for treatment resistant depression. They're covering it for suicidal ideation. They're covering it for migraine. Um, but
Yeah, I think there's some sense around here that I've picked up on that those ketamine clinics are kind of like the bad guys. And one thing that kind of started happening recently that I just learned about is the ketamine. So there's also therapists who
Yeah.
are doing ketamine assisted therapy in their offices, and they've gotten training at something called the Polaris Institute. I think
Okay.
it's someplace out in California. Of course, it's California.
Of course.
And well, recently the ketamine clinic filed a complaint with the licensing boards of both nursing and mental health. They filed a complaint against a ketamine assisted a therapist who's doing ketamine assisted therapy, and I would imagine that's probably the reason. It's because of the medical support.
That's not surprising. Yeah, I know there's some ketamine clinics up here. They're doing like somatic work with ketamine. That's like pretty cool, where you can get acupuncture and massage, like ketamine assisted massage and ketamine assisted acupuncture, and like in conjunction with like some therapy. Like there's uh, a psychiatrist and a therapist and an acupuncturist and somatic healer that all kind of work in the office. And they're trying to do like these monthly subscription services to make it more affordable and excessive. And then you get like a discount. So it's like $275 a month with unlimited acupuncture. And then you get like a prescription for the lozenge. So you can use the lozenge with it. And then like,
Wow.
yeah. And then like 25% off your IV ketamine if you want. I mean, like it's this whole thing. And they're trying to make it more accessible. Um, yeah, they're just, it's like we're trying to figure out a way to do this to like
Interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some of the clinics, though, they go in and then they go belly up, and yeah.
Interesting. Around here, it's sort of seen as a way for doctors to get rich quick. Like they're doing a lot of therapeutic bypassing. That's sort of the
Yeah.
sense.
Well, and then
Anybody else?
I have a
Mhm.
question.
Yeah.
Why don't these people get arrested? The caregivers
well, ketamine's legal.
or anybody to give to anybody?
No, they have a prescriber. They're working with a prescriber. They're working with the nurse
He's
practitioners.
a legal prescriber.
It is legal.
Okay. I don't know. It seems like a perfect opportunity to really scam.
So it is depending on the situation. So that's kind of where the problem is, I mean, if you're an MD, there are, like, most of the clinics are either, MDs or nurse practitioners, or that are working these clinics that are actually prescribing. So those are on the up and up for the most part. But then when you get into these underground situations, a lot of people are, you know, really coming at this from a very, like, care driven, wholesome, they wanting to do good standpoint. But can you get arrested for, you know, doing the work? Sure. There are a lot of, like, facilitators or guides that are, doing underground psychedelic therapy that are not providing any substances to people. You have to get your own substance, but then there's the ethics of, especially, like, if you're working with at-risk communities, BIPOC people, undocumented immigrants, and you're saying, well, you have to procure your own substance, and you're sending somebody out there to procure a substance, they could end up procuring something illegally and getting arrested. And then all of a sudden, are you responsible for that? I mean, morally, ethically, um, that's a gray area. If somebody's coming to you and they already have something, that is a little bit different than, you telling somebody, I'll give you the service if you go get.
Aren't some people excluded because of the cost? I mean, like a poor
Absolutely.
person couldn't do this.
No, I'm excluded because of the cost. I mean, I've been wanting to do this, as soon as I figured it out, I was like, oh my God, I want to do this. And the only reason I had access to it was because my insurance was covering it.
Yeah, I can't
And
think
yeah.
insurance covers it. I bet
Yeah.
not in Kentucky where I am.
It depends. My insurance was covering it because of complex PTSD and migraines and stuff. Because ketamine in the form of Spravato, it's a nasal spray, is for treatment-resistant depression. So, yeah. So
And the Spravato, is that something you take home with you, like a nebulizer, or is it something you do in the clinic?
no, I haven't actually used Spravato, but that's how they're kind of in this, like, weird gray area of, some insurance will cover it. But I got to tell you, after, like, a few infusions, I mean, I was doing, like, having panic attacks and taking Klonopin, clonazepam pretty consistently. And then after a few IV sessions, I went 8 months without having to take any benzos for panic attacks. So, I mean, there's that, like, does it, like, is there some evidence behind it working? Yeah, I had some friends that did the same thing and have went from being agoraphobic after COVID to, like, being able to actually, like, go out of the house. And yeah.
So did you do that with a therapist? Was it, or you just went into the clinic and?
Yeah, and then did talk to my therapist separately. Like,
Okay.
yeah.
But you did have a therapist help you
Oh
integrate
yeah.
the process.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Oh
Okay.
yeah. But then I did try to do a psilocybin journey on my own that went horribly wrong because I saved a bunch of money and up for it, and then the practitioner didn't know what she was doing, changed the protocols day of, didn't provide enough guidance, dose. Like, I was on SSRIs, it didn't work. I paid 1,500. I mean, I'm on Social Security income and I'm a broke grad student. So, we all know how that goes. And $1,500 of money that is hard for me to come by. And but I also then had this weird thing happen where like I ended up doing this vacation thing that I ended up healing some trauma that from when I was a teenager. So did it actually not work? Or did I just think it didn't work? I mean, who knows? Could have been a coincidence. Maybe it did something. So something happened, not to the level that it should have. And the provider didn't have the ethics in place that she should have. But how, how would I have known?
I have another issue of access that I'd love to just get the thoughts of everybody in the group. But one issue of access is access to information from a credible source, as you were saying. And I'm finding at my institution, we're fighting a battle about having a conversation about psychedelics in a medical space because there's so much, there's the fear of legality, and there's just different epistemological, frameworks of efficacy, the pharmaceutical efficacy versus whatever else, socially situated efficacy. And so anyway, I think there's a barrier to information there, and that and the taboo around talking about it is pretty significant in academic, because at UAB there's a big medical school, and so the medical people, there are some clinical trials here, but that's as close as they want to get to it. They don't want to have conversations about it in the larger context of therapy and its potential usefulness. They especially don't like the word psychedelics. It's a trigger word for them. Does anybody have any thoughts on that, or have you encountered anything similar?
Anybody else before I?
Can you make generalizations about the population that participates in this? Like age?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely some fear around academic discourse crossing over into that medical realm. I think it's coming along depending on location, and I think obviously like more progressive cities are going first, and will it kind of start touching areas as more research comes into play? Yes. I mean, the same thing where if you told a doctor that you were taking weed gummies a few years ago, where they'd be like, well, now you're a drug addict and it's going in your file, versus the other day when I was at my doctor's office and I said I was pissed off because now I'm sleeping well because I'm taking a gummy at night. And they're like, well, why aren't you taking cannabis gummies? MS is one of the reasons that it was made legal. Of course you should be taking those gummies. And I'm like, are you kidding me? After all the meds you've had me try and you're telling me, and they're like, well, yeah, you should be taking your gummies. I'm like, yeah, I want to, but yeah, I went to the spinal clinic a week or so ago and was talking to my pain management doctor. And I'm like, yeah, I'm having all this pain. I can't do this. I can't do that. And he's like, yeah, like right now, I don't really think we can do much for you. I said, the one thing that actually was really helping, I was getting ketamine infusions, and that actually, amazingly enough, was helping the pain. And he was like, didn't you mention something about psychedelic research stuff? And I was like, yeah. He's like, what you should really do instead of this like psychedelic therapy stuff, you should research psychedelic use for chronic pain. He's like, there's not enough research on that. So sorry, I can't really, you should take a mindfulness class for your chronic pain, but just do research on psychedelic pain. There's not enough research on it. Go research that and take psychedelics for your chronic pain and do some research on it and then come back. And I'm like, great. Thanks for nothing, but I'll do some research, I guess, on psychedelics and chronic pain. So the tide is turning a bit. Like, doctors are out there that want the information, because they don't want to keep giving people opioids. I mean, you know, there's people that are out there that are having like horrible pain. I mean, yeah, the type of pain that I have is stuff that, 15 years ago they would have, I mean, I would have had pockets full of oxy and Dilaudid. And right now, they're like, I guess you could take ibuprofen, but it's kind of bad for your liver and kidneys. So meditate about it, you know. Um, and now, oh, maybe some research on psychedelics would be a good idea. So take some cannabis. So, 20 years from now, maybe it'll be not a big deal. And Phyllis, as far as age, it's all over the map. I think it just kind of depends. You'd be surprised, I think, at
Surprised at what, old people or young people? I wouldn't be surprised about old people.
I think no, I think it's more like the people that are not, or that are probably more like more cautious, I'd say, are probably people that are either maybe middle-aged people are a little bit more cautious. Young people and old people are not. It doesn't seem, from people I've been talking to, and of course this is all just like anecdotal at this point. I don't have any of like hard numbers yet, but yeah, it's more situational. I've been doing a class at Stanford on psychedelia and the Grateful Dead, so all the deadheads are fine with it. Um, yeah, anybody that was kind of like involved in any counterculture movements, all fine. Younger people think everything should be legal because what cannabis has been legal now in the frameworks. I think there's a lot of that, like maybe Gen X, that's a little more questionable. That's kind of where I am, though. Maybe more cautious. I think because we were so, you're going to jail. It's that, yeah, everybody's going to jail for everything. I'm more cautious.
So tell us a little bit more about what you're doing for your dissertation work, or what kind of questions are you working on right now?
Yeah, I'm looking at ethics in psychedelic care. So mostly how psychedelic practitioners are being trained. So I'm probably going to be going to like participant observation, going to various facilitation train. I'm probably going to get trained like as a facilitator like 6 times over, maybe. And then hopefully.
Standard though, is there any standard that exists?
So yes and no, because it's not regulated or legalized really yet, except for Oregon. Colorado is looking at it, but then, that's a state program, and they're kind of finding that what they did in Oregon, they're saying, oh, maybe we kind of didn't do it quite right. So they're looking, the things that they're doing in Colorado are kind of looking at changing what Oregon put in place. But yeah, one of the big questions that I have is how queer and disabled people are basically being overlooked as far as training as facilitators, but mostly as far as for people looking for psychedelic care. There's not really many provisions in place for people with disabilities. I mean, obviously psychedelic care, a lot of it is geared towards people with, looking for mental health care, but outside of that aspect, a lot of the psychedelic research, obviously people with physical and sensory disabilities are left out of that research in general. But then if you're not training providers on dealing with people that are in altered states of consciousness, that have physical disabilities, practitioners aren't necessarily going to be prepared to deal with access needs.
So you're going to just go around to different training sessions, maybe.
Hopefully, yeah, hopefully.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah, and then hopefully like hang out at some retreats and hunker down and kind of see how they're all working, and if they're being nice to disabled folks, or if they're, maybe show up with a crew of CRIP folks and see what happens. That's I'd love to really actually partner with some folks that are doing clinical trials and see if I could get like an arts-based methods, community, psychedelic practice for queer disabled folks, and like kind of see
Sounds great.
how that works. But I know that there'd have to be like a little bit more like long term. That's not like a show up and just have an afternoon and leave kind of thing. That would take like trust building and like relationship building and integration. And I think that's one of the issues that like that one video that I showed with this is 10 years of therapy in one afternoon. That's a big misconception out there. And even from the people that are participating and having really good results. Like, I mean, I have done ketamine therapy and had some great results. I have a friend that did 6 sessions and is like, my life has changed. Can that happen from some people from a session or 2 of certain psychedelic substances? Sure. Great. Like don't discount that. But then also, in indigenous communities, people that have been working with plant medicines, there's decades of training and involvement and knowledge that goes into knowing these substances and knowing the people in their communities that they're working with. They have a history with people and plant medicine. And this isn't like a one-stop shop. This is a like a lifetime and part of the culture and part of like it's just built into how people, approach healing. And I think that our Western culture is built towards, easy fix. And that's really not the approach that these substances should be perceived to be able to have that benefit. Whether they might accidentally or incidentally do that is one thing, but I don't think that should be what's sold to people. And that's the problem, is that it is being sold that way. And so then there's that expectation.
There's a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
There's a lot of possible good.
Well, and if you're not prepared, and if you don't have like a good support structure, it can like rip open some trauma, and then people don't have something ready to like deal with it. Like if you're ready to deal with your stuff, then great. Like that's the whole point. You rip it open and deal with it. But if you rip it open and you don't have anything to deal with it, then that's when people get into trouble, I think, which is why there's that difference between like recreational use and like intentional use. Like, can you get benefit from recreational use? Probably. Sure. But also, can people get harm from recreational use of psychedelics? Yeah, because you're not in the right mind frame, you're not in the right setting. If you're taking psychedelics and then all of a sudden you're watching some scary movie, it can really mess you up. And I kind of did that to my kid intentionally to scare them off of drugs when they were a teenager. My bad, but things you do when you don't know any better. I found out my kid was 15 and I think it was probably shrooms. And it's like, are you high? I'm like, oh, here, watch this. I think they were watching TV. And I said something like, at night, we're just staring out into the infinite universe. And wow, like what if the gravitational pull of the sun just disappeared? something creepy. It scared the Jesus out of them. And they were like, I am never touching that stuff ever, ever, ever again. Which as a parent, I was like, great, don't do drugs. But but it kind of messed with them a little bit and give them a little bit of an existential crisis, which was not what I was trying to do. But yeah, you watch the wrong movie or somebody says the wrong thing to you and you have an existential crisis on psychedelics. Which is, kind of one of the arguments of you need to be in the right place, you need to be in the right mental capacity. So, there can be harm when you are putting yourself out there not in the right spot.
Any other comments or questions?
Oh, my kid doesn't watch this. Whoops.
Well, we may be able to wrap up a few minutes early. Do you have any parting words of wisdom for us?
I mean, for all of Reddit's failings, I think it's a great space. I mean, if you're looking for some information, but I do agree with the wise words of the user that that said, don't mail drugs because it's a crime. You probably shouldn't mail drugs. But I hope everybody's going to the conference next month. It's next month.
Yeah, only one more month. Next month.
Yeah, next month we're gonna have a good time.
Yeah.
Be working on the program over the weekend.
Great.
Okay, everyone. Well, thank you again, Tiffany.
Thanks.
And we'll see you all next time.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Tiffany.
Sure thing.
That was great. That was really fun.
I swear the